Welcome to Let's Have a Talk with Keith. And today it's going to be a special podcast episode. Just really thinking about what's happening in our country, what's happening in our world, and sometimes how depressing it can be. When we look back and we think about the history, not only of the United States, but looking at the global conflicts that we often come into our focus each and every day. Some of it should be enough to make us squirm and not be able to sleep at night. But what we're seeing in the Ukraine and the devastation and the slaughtering, of innocent people, if it does not warm the heart of humanity, if it does not bring tears to your eyes, if it does not give you a more embroiled sense of compassion and empathy for these people, then I question your own humanity. And I was listening to, the video by President Zelensky, who asked, specifically of our president, leader of the free world, we need you to lead. And so we've been thrown into this conflict of wondering, what should we do? How should we do it? When should we do it? And as you can see, the sanctions that have been, applied have been crippling, to Russia and to all of those bad actors in this theater. But at the same time, even here at home, we're faced with a lot of problems and difficulties, even with inflation and the Fed raising, the key interest rate, which is going to raise our own interest rates. That will make our money a little bit more expensive for us to borrow internally. We're looking at our own gas prices that are hovering to almost $5 a gallon. So yes, it does hurt. But at the same time, is where do we see this remedy? What is the end game? And when we look at the brutality of Vladimir Putin, when we look at the atrocities, when we look at the callousness, but then when we look at the baseless allegations that was used as the pretense for this, we're not going to call this a military, exercise. This was a full blown out invasion of a sovereign country. It makes us sit back and really try to figure out what is the best way that we should act. How do we support and pray and really hope that the Ukrainian people continue to fight for their country, to fight for their freedom, to fight for their democracy. Now, at the same time, we sometimes still face the same jaded comments about, well, what about our country? What about, the United States? We have our own problems as well. Should we be so invested, in what is happening in Europe? And so this reflects back to even in our own history. How do we approach, the concept of invading and invasions, and the concept of being left behind and embattled? And so for some of us, it does hit home, to feel that oppression, to feel the hatred because you want freedom, to want to exterminate that voice of freedom at any cost. We felt that pain here in the United States. It was called the Civil War. And it split our country in two to fight for freedom under the guise of another type of freedom, but freedom nonetheless. And so even today, we still have this discussion about freedom and democracy. And so we can't be scared to be on that mountain of freedom. For it was the boldness of some to pick up arms and fight for the freedom, the emancipation, the absolution, and the abolishment of slavery. But now we're faced with a different type of slaughtering, but still under the guise of eliminating Nazism and all these other types of baseless allegories. And so, yes, we're in the 21st century, but we still have what we call a 19th or a 19th century feel to it. And so how will this 21st century continue to unfold? With more war, with more hatred, with more fighting. And so we see the battle weariness of a people. We just spent the last 20 years, fighting, and we understand that sometimes we have to fight. But I like to, quote one of my most admirable people, Vertner Woodson Tandy, that says, we fight until hell freezes over. And then we fight on the ice. And that is where we are. Even as we sleep and eat and move around, the people in the Ukraine are still fighting for their lives. They're still fighting for their independence, and they're willing to die for it. And so the tangible support that we should be able to give, if, to watch that woman die, a pregnant woman die, baby, unborn die, to see them bomb places where you have women and children fleeing, this bloodshed and wrath, it should make our hearts feel sad. But at the same time, how do we support these people? We understand that we don't want to be in another world war, but let's not parse rhetoric. We're already at war. And whether or not we want to admit it, World War III is already in effect. But we're fighting this war on an economic scale. We're fighting it via humanitarian aid. We're fighting it via military support and money and other weapons that we're supplying. So how do we fight a de facto war? That's the most difficult thing. And as you hear the president, say, look, we need things. Well, sometimes it's how do we get it there? Why should it matter? What difference will it make? Who will it affect? And that is the overarching question. I was watching NCAA tournament this evening, and I was listening to Charles Barkley, and he said, I don't have the courage to do this. We got boxers that are from the Ukrainian that are left to give up their careers to pick up a gun and fight for their country. He was opining that, hey, even I don't have the courage, to do that. And so for those of us that are out here, it does take some courage, because you're willing to sacrifice everything for the saving of family, friends, neighbor, country. And so today we still fight that fight here on our own home front. but at the same time, we see the ravages of it across the pond. And so, yes, so how do we stand for the Ukraine? I stand for them every day, in my thoughts, in my prayers. And I'm going to give a shameless plug to the Door Country Candle Company, which is located in Wisconsin. And they're actually making, homemade candles, that are in the Ukrainian colors, and they're giving that money, to the Ukrainians for humanitarian efforts. And so, I plan to buy some candles from them. I hope that you guys will look at that Door County Candle Company based out of Wisconsin and buy one as well. It's the little thing that we can do to stand for the Ukrainians. And oftentimes we think about this slogan, hell to pay. But yes, someone will pay, for these atrocities. Someone will pay for the pain and the suffering and the death and the destruction of cities. Someone will pay. But we just have to have the faith and the vision to continue to stand strong and know that the end game is there. We just can't see it right now. And so for the Ukrainian people, I love that when he ends his, his statements, he says, glory to the Ukraine. The same way that we say, God bless the United States of America. We do need that blessing and that support to flow all across. And so even for our Russian friends who don't support this war, this invasion, but they're censored, that they cannot speak, then it is up to us to be that voice for the voiceless. Just as how we stand against the atrocities that we see here in the United States, we still must give a voice to the voiceless, to give a help to the helpless, to give a shirt to those who need it, shoes, whatever that is needed, to maintain that sense of humanity. And so even as we sit here right now, we look at this absence of humanity. We look at this absence of care. We look at this absence of civility. And we have to sit back and wonder, what's next? Who's next? If we don't take a stand, who's next? And that might be a question that we don't want to answer, at this present moment. But let that sink deep into the recesses of our minds. If we allow this, who's next? And will we have that same level of fear? Or will we have a heightened sense of action? And so to the Ukrainian people, to Ukrainians that are listening to this, family members that live here in the United States and abroad, because this podcast touches many, different countries. The world is united to stand with Ukrainians, to stand against the tyranny of Vladimir Putin, who sometimes in the deep recess of my mind, watching the slaughter of innocents, people, flashes back to another dictator, one whom we know so well in the annals of our history. This one was a chancellor. They simply called him Führer. And so that's what we're up against now. This is the 21st version of the Fuhrer. And we're going to have to take a stand if we're going to step back and watch the annihilation of people, innocent people. Or will we take a stand to beat back the oppressor, to stem the tide of the oppression, and to be an emancipator, continue to be a freedom fighter? And so that is what I think, President Zelensky is really asking, and, very candidly, he asked that question. We need you to be that leader. Because I believe that we're either going to live in a free world or we're going to live in a world of oppression. And we already feel and see how oppression weighs upon us. So yes, we do need a bigger breath of fresh air, a bigger breath of freedom. And so for these Ukrainians who sleep and hide under the threat of losing their life at any moment, hold on. And may we continue to be that presence, that they can feel our support, to know that they also will hold on, because we're holding with them, even from afar. And so as I kind of wrap this one up, I'm going to continue it, and I'm going to keep my eye pretty focused on the events of what is happening, because I do think that this is not the end of a conversation, but it is the beginning of a conversation. And so I think that the weapons that we have of deterrent become the weapons that we cower behind. And so it becomes such a task to try to figure out how to make these things work. But at the end of the day, the right thing will be done. It may not always be the comfortable solution, but it will be the most practical that we need. So we'll talk a little bit more, and I promise to get this back on a little bit more consistently, because there's just so much, I just couldn't get my head wrapped around it. But we will follow it. And I hope that, as you're listening to this, hit the bell, please subscribe, and really just to hear, a poor man's thought about how these current events are unfolding and how similar they are to our history. And I do believe that if we do not learn from our history, we will be doomed to repeat it. So thanks for tuning in. And my prayers are with the people of the Ukraine, even at this hour, that their fight will not be in vain, that these deaths, these senseless deaths will not be in vain, that their struggle for freedom will not be in vain. So that is my prayer for the people of the Ukraine. It is the same prayer for my people in the United States of America, that our bigotry will cease, that our oppression will cease, that we learn these life lessons, that we are no different. We're just not out there killing each other or taking over to prove a point. But we too need that same type of unity. Just as how 535 members of Congress can stand in support of the Ukraine, then how hard should it be for 535 legislators to do what's best even for our own country? That is the question that we should answer. And that is what we should take from this situation in the Ukraine. How can we use this to even make our own country stronger and better? That's all I got. And look forward to talking to you again next time. And take care.